Hey guys, and welcome to our next set of notes, which is on experiments. Now, you guys will see here that there are a lot of learning targets. I haven't included all the learning targets in the other videos, but we will be talking about them, and believe it or not, we discussed them in the videos. But I wanted you guys to see here, okay, all of the different things that we have here that are listed for experimentation. Now, one of the things that you guys should know is that there are a lot of terms in this set of notes. So what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do here, is to put the terms together so that you can see a picture of not only what the term is or how it's defined, but actually what it looks like in the overall picture of an experiment. So first of all, experiments are actually the only research method that explore cause and effect. So we have looked at descriptive methods, which are case study, naturalistic observation, and a survey. We also looked at the correlational research method, okay? We've looked at that, but the only one of all of those that can show cause and effect is experimentation. So, like other sciences, psychology uses experimentation as a backbone of its research because really we can't just observe our way into a theory. You actually have to experiment so that we can try and find a cause. And in our case, for psychology, it would be a cause of behavior or a cause of a mental process, right? So, examples of some famous psychological experiments. Number one, Pavlov's salivating dogs, which you guys can see there on the right-hand side. This is a very famous experiment, which we'll explore in Unit 6. And then two other ones which come out of our social psych unit, Milgram's obedience study and Ash's conformity experiment. Now, these are extremely widely popular studies, very famous, and we'll be talking about them as we hit the units, but I just wanted you guys to know that these are some examples of what we will be looking at. So if you did want to look them up, you could get an idea of, well, this is what psychologists do. All right, this is what they study. So again, it's crucial that you know and understand that experiments are the only research method that can actually isolate cause and effect. It's the only method that allows you to determine that one variable actually caused the other. We talked about variables in research. We talked about the relationship between variables. But in correlation, the only thing that we know is that there's a relationship between the variables. We don't actually know what caused the variables. Like one didn't cause another. They just kind of have a relationship together, and one has some sort of impact on the other for some reason. But in experiments, we actually get to see cause and effect. Okay? If an experiment is done correctly, we can see cause and effect. So ultimately, when we're looking at experiments, and make sure, let me say this. I better start by saying this. Make sure that in your notes, all right, I'm going to be giving you definitions of what each thing is, okay? What each term is. Make sure that in your notes you put the definition for the term and then you put the example that I give you for the term, because I don't want you to just have the definition. In psychology, in most things, having a definition of something is not actually knowing it. It's knowing what it is. It's not knowing how to apply it. So you guys need to know not only what these terms are, you guys need to understand how to apply them. And that means having an understanding of them and knowing how to use them in context. So let's start here with our terms. The first one we've seen before, a hypothesis. All right. In an experiment, we start with a hypothesis or a testable prediction. For this experiment that we're going to look at conducting, we start really, kind of with a question or statement. Caffeine helps keep high school teachers happy. All right. I would totally concur with that. Now, what are we looking at here? Well, we're actually looking at, we want to test the effects of caffeine on the behavior of high school teachers. So at this point, all right, when somebody at first researchers who, let's say we're the researchers, right? We have our hypothesis that caffeine helps keep high school teachers happy. So now what we have to do is we have our variables, right? So we have caffeine and we have happiness. So now what we have to do is we have to create operational definitions for the variables in the experiment. We have to do this. So, what might those variables be? All right. Think of what it is they are measuring in the experiment, or what we are measuring in the experiment. So, we're operationally going to define how they are going to measure, or how we are going to measure happiness. All right. So we are looking at really, all right, what is keeping teachers happy? And we're going to use one thing that we think might be keeping them happy, which is caffeine. So we know that one variable is caffeine. We know the other is happiness. So what we really have to do here is that we're going to assign caffeine to some groups of teachers, and then we're going to measure actually how happy they are. So if you want to measure how happy teachers are, you need to determine how are we going to measure happiness, right? So we have to operationally define that variable of happiness, all right, and how much caffeine, all right. So we have to, number one, define what does caffeine mean, okay, that we're feeding to, how many cups of coffee or soda or whatever, okay, what would that be? But also, we have to come up with a definition of what happiness is, okay, and we have to figure out, like, what does that mean? Does that mean the teachers are alert? Does that mean that teachers are ready to go? Does that mean the teachers smile all day long? Does that mean that teachers, aren't tired by the afternoon, or if they're tired and they drink another cup of coffee or something and they're happy again? How do we measure happiness? All right. So that is what we need to figure out. Now, we're not going to come up with a definition for happiness in this, but just know that when you're talking about operationally defining something, what you are talking about is assigning meaning to it. All right. So in order to figure out happiness, I have to say what that means. What does happiness mean? Now, it doesn't mean in life overall. It just means in the study. Okay. In the study that we are doing. So then we look at who is our population. So who are we going to do this research on? So what larger group of category or people are we going to be researching? In this case, teachers, we know that. More specifically, let's say that we're going to look at teachers at Dover High School. And let's say that we have about 250 teachers, which we don't, but we're just going to use that. About 250 teachers at Dover High School. And are we going to experiment on all of them? Okay, so are we going to try and get all of them into the experiment? And remember, from your ethics studies, your ethics lesson, you know that people in a study have to give informed consent. So what if you have teachers who are like, no, I'm not participating in your study. It's stupid and I'm not doing it, right? So what happens? Well, we need to not only, look at everybody in the group. We need to everybody in the group. So every teacher in the group at Dover High would be our population, but we want to figure out, how are we going to get what is called a sample? All right. So not the 250 teachers at Dover High. All right. But a smaller size, a smaller sample of these teachers. So what I want you guys to think of is, let's say, I'll use myself here. Let's say that I'm going to buy some new perfume for myself. And I go to the store, and I don't know about you guys, but they can smell one way at the store, like perfume or cologne. But when you get them home and you put them on yourself, you're like, oh, that doesn't smell like it smelled in the store. So what am I going to do? I'm going to get a bunch of little samples. I'm not going to buy all the bottles that I think I want to get, but I'm probably going to get a bunch of little samples. And then I'm going to take them home, and I might try a different one each day. And some I might be like, oh, this is awful. And some I might be like, okay, that's good. That's not good. But what I did is that I got a sample of, what perfume is out there so that I can choose the one or come to a conclusion of which one I want. So in our sample here for Dover High School, what we're doing is, in the same way in research, as with the bottle, our sample has to kind of represent that bottle of perfume, okay? It has to represent the population that it came from. Our representative sample, or our sample, has to come from the population, and it has to be representative of that population. So basically, it has to be representative of all the people. So it has to be representative of all the teachers, not just some of the teachers, but all of the teachers. So what would that look like at Dover High School, and how would we obtain a representative sample? So maybe what we would have to do is that we would have to look at possibly getting maybe, let's say, 2 teachers from each grade level, each subject, all types of teachers from different areas, that there are, and we have to make sure that there's a mix of male and female teachers. It can't be all female and it can't be all male. That's the only way to get our representative sample. So we know who, okay, which we know we're going to be looking at teachers, right? So now we have to figure out how, okay? Basically, how do we get this sample? So if we want a random sample, which is representative of everyone in the population or in the group, we have to make sure that everyone in that population or group has an equal chance of being chosen for the experiment. So how would we randomly sample teachers? All right. Well, first of all, we'd have to get that informed consent, letting us know that, okay, these teachers said that they would be willing to participate in your little study there, your experiment. So then what we would do is, let's say that out of 250 teachers, we got 200 who said, we will totally participate in this experiment. All right. So now we don't want that big, huge sample of the 200 teachers still. That's just too many. So maybe what we do is we know that we want like 50 or 25 teachers. Let's go with about 50 teachers. So let's say that we actually separate the hats out, okay, and we put all the names in a hat and draw a good number based on how big our population is. Now, with males and females, we would probably have to make sure that we had different hats. Like we'd have hats of males and hats of females and draw one from one and one from the other. All right. So we'd know that we'd get males and females and we'd get a good number based on how big our population is. That would give us a good random sample of our population. Now there's another thing that's called a stratified sample. So this is where your population is divided into relevant subcategories, and a random sample is taken from each subcategory. So in this instance, in order for us to get a stratified sample of our population, we might have to divide Dover High School staff into categories. So male, female, by subject. All right. So if they're in the math, science, English, social studies, world languages, CTE, phys ed, health, art, music department, etc. All right. Or if they are a new teacher, a brand new teacher, or a veteran teacher like me who's been there for 20 years, who maybe we tend to be a little more cranky than the first year teacher, right? So what we need to do is in order to get a stratified sample, you would have to put everybody and separate everybody out into a subcategory, put everything into a hat, and then draw a random sample from each hat. So you would draw, like, let's say in each hat you had, I don't know, like 50 names or, whatever, then you would draw out, let's say, only 10 from each department, or let's say 2 from each department, and then, however you're doing it. All right. But you have to to get a stratified sample, you have to do that random sample again, meaning you have to do it over and over for each category that you want to get. Okay, so that's what you want. Now, the key understanding from that is, and that it's really important, and you need to know this, is that we randomly sample so that the sample is representative of the population. If it's truly a random sample, then everyone has to have an equal opportunity to be chosen. All right, and that is the only way that it's representative, is that everybody in that population, all of Dover High School's teachers, had a chance to be in that. From our population, every Dover High School teacher had a chance, an equal chance of, being in the study. All right. And certain names were chosen, okay, pulled out of a hat. And that gives us our representative sample, which would be representative of the population at large. So why would we want to do that? Well, because we need to know that whatever study that we do, we can generalize the findings to the larger population. So let's say that for some reason we ended up with all female English teachers in a sample. Well, we can't say then that that's representative of all teachers at Dover High School. We can't say that because it was only female English teachers, because it doesn't represent males. It doesn't represent anybody from the other subjects. Okay. So we need to make sure that we can generalize our findings by having a representative and balanced, sample of the population. So that we can say that findings apply to the population and not just the sample, we have to make sure that it's representative.